Welcome to Small Business Spotlight, a podcast where successful business owners share proven practices and their secrets for business success. Hello everyone, I'm your host Rav Vendiratha from Social Squares, and Landing Leads is where my business leads. Today's topic is very interesting. The top 3 things to know and ask before registering a trademark. And of course, I have an expert on the subject, Sharon Adams from Adams Law Offices. Sharon, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Rob, for having me here.
Sharon, I know you've been in the legal space for 30 plus years and you've been doing trademarks for a decade, but why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your practice?
Thanks. Yes, my name is Sharon Adams. I'm the owner of Adams Law Office in Berkeley, California, and we focus entirely on trademarks. So that's why we're here to talk about trademarks today.
That's so cool. And in a lot of ways, trademarks confused me. So why don't we start with what are the key differences between a trademark and a patent?
Okay, so the key thing about a trademark is that a trademark is for branding a good or a service. So it's not just something that's out there in the universe. The name or the logo has to be associated with goods or services. And just like a patent, okay, a patent is an invention. So it doesn't even have to be a good or a service. Obviously, it could be a physical object or it could be a method, but you don't have to have it in the marketplace. You know, you just can invent something, and then you can, if it's novel, you will get a patent on it. Versus a trademark, for example, a trademark could be reused. You know, for a patent, you must be the first to invent worldwide, actually, is how they look at it. But for a trademark, if the trademark has been used and expired, somebody else can come along and use the same trademark.
That's interesting. So let's talk about entrepreneurs. So what are the different types of trademarks and what would you recommend for entrepreneurs?
Okay, so the different types of trademarks are in use when you're currently using a trademark, and intent to use. So an intent to use trademark has a lot of value, because if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting your business, whether you have a good or a product, good or a service, you might want to take care to get your brand name registered as a trademark, because it takes about a year to go through the process. So what happens with an intent to use trademark is, you've got this concept, especially if you're going to do packaging, okay, something that costs a lot of money. You want to file it as intent to use. You intend to use it in the future, but maybe you're not there yet. And then you get what's called a notice of allowance, which is a tentative approval. Then you know you're probably going to be able to get your trademark. And then you can go forward, pay for all that expensive packaging, right? So that's an intent to use. But then on the other hand, some obviously businesses are currently using their trademarks. Then you file a trademark that's in use. It's currently in use, which means it's actually being used for goods or services that are being provided to consumers, or B2B.
Interesting. So intent to use is much faster, and in use, it takes up to a year, or both?
They both take up about a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why basically it takes about 10 months actually to get your first. They're the same. So you file an intent to use or an in use. They're the same process. It's just a different identity. One's in use, one's intent to use. They're analyzed in exactly the same way. They go through the trademark process. After about 10 months for both of them, there's some sort of U.S. Patent and Trademark Office communication, and it will hopefully say, hey, we found no likelihood of confusion. Maybe there's a minor issue, but it'll go forward from that point. But that's the good news. Okay, 10 months down, you get that. But if you file it and you go 10 months down the road and you get this thing from the USPTO, which says, we have found a likelihood of confusion, that's a very difficult, I can explain that a little bit more, but that's a very difficult refusal to overcome. So that's why I'm saying, if you have product packaging, you might want to know ahead of time whether you want to go through that 10 months and get your tentative approval before you go forward and pay for the full amount of the packaging.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, let's switch gears and come to the title of this podcast, right? So what
Yes.
would you say are the top 3 things to know and ask before registering a trademark?
Okay, numero uno. Okay. Please search the name, because what can happen is a lot of times I get people that go on to the internet and they find a domain name that's available, and they think because the domain name is available that they will have the trademark rights to that name. That is incorrect. They might be able to get the domain name and own it. That's true, they could, but they may still never be able to get the trademark rights to that domain name. Sometimes that matters, sometimes that doesn't. So my first like thing that I would recommend that entrepreneurs or anybody do is to just do what's called a trademark clearance search. And that's something I can do, or other trademark attorneys can do, where we have a way to do a pretty thorough search of existing pending applications and registrations to look for that likelihood of confusion.
Interesting. What would you say are the other 2?
The other 2 are failure to apply for a trademark. I have had people that have been in business for several years, and then they apply, and then they discover that I had this exact situation. They discover that during the time they were in business, somebody applied for their trademark, their brand name. So if they had applied when they started their business, they would have gotten it. Then they waited like 5 years. In the interim, somebody else applied. You know, people think, oh, I was the first user. The trademark process is first to file.
I see.
You can potentially overcome that situation, but then you're looking at a much more expensive process. So if you just get in there and file, you establish your rights.
Interesting. And what would you say is the final one?
Okay, and the third one is to failure to apply for an international trademark. Now, this is kind of specific, but I also just had this experience, and I think I'm seeing it more and more often. People that are selling products on Amazon or but Amazon is very typical. Yeah. Okay, you have a US trademark. You've got your protection here in the US, but somebody in Europe can see your exact product and your exact trademark, and they can apply for your trademark, in Spain or wherever, you know, get the trademark in Spain. Okay, then they have that trademark in Spain. You have it here in the US, but when you're on a platform like Amazon, is that really clear, you know, where the trademark is and which country it's coming from? So that would be my third thing was, you know, if the budget allows, apply for the international trademark.
So there is one international body you can apply to and it covers the entire globe, or there are multiple bodies you need to go and apply to?
There's, it's called the Madrid Protocol. And basically it is somewhat international. That's as they call them, the contracting parties, which is the countries that have signed on to this Madrid Protocol. So it's not every country, but, you know, China, Australia, Canada, Mexico, you know, all of Europe, you know, a lot of countries are in it.
All the Amazon countries are covered.
Yes, all the Amazon countries are covered. Exactly.
That's awesome. These are some great insights. Thank you so much for sharing, Sharon. I have one last question before I let you go, and that's because I'm in the business. So what is the one digital marketing strategy you would say has worked for your business?
Okay. I'm not sure my business is typical. Maybe you have some insight on this, but I do a lot of assistance to people that have applied for trademarks on their own without an attorney, and then they get this office action, like I said, rejecting it for some reason or another. And it can be complicated, you know, to try to resolve all this technical information. So I have a process, a system where I send directed emails to people that have gotten office actions, you know, that aren't represented by attorneys. And I don't do it, I use a service, but that is my most effective digital marketing.
That's cool. And it's very smart, right? I mean, you can get that data, it's validated already, and you're targeting them. That's awesome. And email marketing in general, it's still the most effective form of reaching potential customers.
Really?
Yeah, it's definitely in the top 3. I mean, Google search, the way I like to think about it is Google search is pull-based advertising because you're reaching people who are already looking.
Right.
Social media and email marketing is more push-based advertising because you don't know if they're looking or not. But in your case, you have essentially combined the two because these folks have been rejected and they would be looking, and
Yes.
you are targeting them. So that's very smart. And kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
This was a great session, Sharon. I think the insights you shared would be very valuable for our audience. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Rob, for having me.